Elena Rivera never expected anything extraordinary to happen in her life. She was 16, quiet, and happiest when she was sitting at an old upright piano in the corner of her family's small living room. The wood was scratched, some of the keys were chipped, and the pedal squeaked if she pressed it too hard. But to her it felt like home. It was the one place where her hands understood her better than her voice ever could. She lived in a small town where everyone knew each other, and people thought her talent was impressive but nothing world-changing. Just a shy girl with a gift, nothing more, or so she believed. Every morning before school, she practiced with a metronome ticking gently beside her. She played scales until her fingers tingled, and then she tried pieces she found online, pieces she recorded on her phone and played back to study her own mistakes. She was always trying to get better, not to impress anyone, but because music made her feel less alone when she played. She forgot that she stumbled over her words, that she didn't know how to talk to crowds, or how her knees shook during school presentations when she played. She wasn't shy, she was free, and that feeling kept her going. One normal afternoon, as she was packing up her books, her music teacher, Mr. Gallard, called her over. He was always encouraging, always patient, a bit older and with a gentle smile that made students feel seen. "Elena," he said, holding a letter in both hands like it was fragile. "Something came for you?" She blinked, confused. She hardly received mail, definitely not at school. She wiped her palms on her jeans before she took it. Her heart thumped a little faster. The envelope had an elegant seal, and the handwriting looked like it belonged to someone important. She tore it open carefully, her breath held somewhere between her ribs. As she read, her eyes widened. She read it again to be sure she understood, and again, just to believe it wasn't a trick of her imagination. The invitation was from the production team of a televised music showcase. Not just any showcase, but one hosted by the world-famous Maestro Victor Drajan. Elena had seen clips of him online, a legend in classical music, known for his sharp tongue and high expectations. Some admired him, some feared him, and almost everyone respected him. Somehow, her name was on the list of chosen young artists to appear on the show. Her knees felt weak. "Is this real?" she asked in a whisper. Her teacher nodded with excitement shining in his eyes. "It is," he said. "You deserve this." The room seemed to tilt for a moment, like the world was shifting. She was going to play on television, in front of cameras, in front of a live audience, and worst of all, in front of Victor Drajan himself. She didn't know whether to scream with joy or run away and hide under the piano. When she brought the letter home, her parents stared at it in disbelief. Her mother covered her mouth with both hands, tears forming in her eyes. "This is amazing," she said, hugging Elena so tight she could hardly breathe. Her father laughed and shook his head like the world finally realized what they always knew. "You're going to be great," he said, voice steady and proud. The support warmed her heart, but it also added a weight she hadn't expected. What if she disappointed them? What if she went there and everyone realized she didn't belong? What if the invitation was a mistake? That night, sleep refused to come. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind tapping branches against her window. Her mind spun like a carousel she couldn't stop. She imagined the bright lights, the polished stage, the cameras focusing on her trembling hands. She imagined Victor's eyes on her, sharp and cold. She imagined playing beautifully, receiving applause, going viral even. But then she imagined the opposite, a mistake so loud it echoed, a silence so heavy it crushed her. She pressed her palms over her eyes, trying to breathe normally, trying to believe she could handle it. The next few days felt like months. Elena practiced harder than she ever had before. It wasn't just practice, it was survival. Every note carried her hopes and fears. Every scale felt like a step toward a future she wasn't sure she was ready for. Her teacher helped her choose a piece, a classical selection she felt comfortable with, something she could rely on even if nerves tried to steal her focus. But as she played it again and again, she wondered if comfortable was enough. Would a comfortable piece make her stand out, or would she be forgettable? People in her town found out quickly. They congratulated her at the grocery store, wished her luck at the school entrance. Even the bakery added a little sign near the counter that said, "Good luck, Elena," in purple icing letters on a cake. It was sweet, but the attention made her anxious. She wasn't used to being seen like this. She wasn't used to being someone others expected something from. The more people celebrated, the more her stomach twisted into nervous knots. She didn't want to let anyone down. Finally, the day arrived. The flight to the city felt unreal. Clouds drifted by the plane window like slow thoughts, and she kept the invitation letter in her lap the whole time, clutching it like a lifeline. Her parents sat beside her, whispering encouragement every now and then. When they landed, cameras flashed as other young performers arrived, some confident, some nervous, all talented. Elena watched them and felt smaller than ever. She tucked her hands into her sleeves, wishing she could disappear into the airport floor. At the studio, the lobby was grand, filled with posters of past performers, famous faces that had once stood where she was standing. The air smelled like polished wood and excitement. A coordinator welcomed the group and explained the schedule. There would be rehearsals, interviews, and then the live show. Elena tried to absorb the information, but her thoughts kept drifting. Her fingers twitched as if searching for a piano key that wasn't there. When Victor Drajan entered the room, silence fell like a curtain. He carried an aura of importance, like the air shifted around him. His posture was perfect, his suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. Elena felt her pulse quicken. She had seen him only on screens before, but in person, he was more intimidating than she expected. Still, she wanted to believe that maybe he wasn't as harsh as rumors said. Maybe he would see her effort, her passion, and offer guidance. At rehearsal, each performer played a short section for Victor to hear. When it was Elena's turn, her legs felt unsteady. She sat at the grand piano, its surface shining like a mirror. She placed her fingers on the keys, took a breath, and began to play. The sound was clear, gentle, careful. She tried to lose herself in the music, but she could feel Victor's gaze like a weight on her shoulders. She stumbled slightly, just a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but it felt like an earthquake. To her, her heart raced. She finished the section, hands trembling. Victor walked closer, his shoes tapping sharply against the floor. He looked down at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "You have technique," he said, his voice cool, but no confidence. The words stung. They were not cruel, but they were blunt, direct. The other performers watched quietly. No one spoke. Elena nodded, unable to find her voice. She wished she could explain that she was trying, that she loved music more than anything. But the words got stuck. Victor turned away, moving to the next performer, and Elena sat there, feeling small again. Still, she didn't break. Something in her chest tightened, not with fear this time, but determination. If she was going to be here, she would give everything she had. She would not let doubt win. She would not let that comment define her. She reminded herself that she earned this chance. She wasn't here by accident. She wasn't here because someone felt sorry for her. She was here because she worked hard, because she had talent, because she had a voice even if it didn't come out through her mouth. That night, in her hotel room, Elena sat by the window with a notebook on her lap. She wrote down every fear, every hope, every sound her fingers wished they could play. She looked at her hands, small and delicate, and told herself they were capable, even if her heart was scared. She closed her eyes and imagined stepping on that stage not to impress Victor or please the audience, but to share the only language she truly trusted, music. She imagined playing not perfectly, but honestly and for the first time since the invitation arrived. She felt a spark, something bright and warm, something like belief. Tomorrow would come, and she would be ready. Her journey was just beginning, and even though she didn't know what the world would think of her, she knew one thing for certain. She would play with everything she had, and let the music speak for her. The morning after rehearsal felt heavier than any day Elena had known. She woke before her alarm. The sky outside still dark and quiet. Her heart beat unevenly, as if it was still running from yesterday. She sat up in the hotel bed and stared at the curtains, unsure of how to feel. Excited, scared, grateful, embarrassed. All of it mixed together like tangled strings inside her chest. Her parents were still asleep in the next room. She didn't want to wake them. So she moved quietly, brushing her teeth and splashing cold water on her face to chase away the fog of worry. She didn't feel glamorous or confident like the other performers she had seen. She felt like herself. a girl from a small town with shaky hands and a dream that suddenly grew too big for her to hold comfortably. Downstairs, the hotel lobby buzzed with life. Performers with perfect posture and confident smiles walked past her. They spoke in clear voices about their technique, about awards they had won, about the Maestro like he was a challenge they were eager to face. Elena listened silently, hugging her coat close to her body. She wondered if they could sense her fear, if it showed on her face like smudged ink. The production staff handed out schedules for the day. Elena scanned the paper. Her section included interviews, another round of rehearsals and camera tests. She felt her stomach twist. She would have to speak, not just play. Talking was harder than any piece she had ever learned. She could memorize keys, but she couldn't memorize courage. She took a deep breath, reminding herself she was here for a reason. She had earned at least the right to try. At breakfast, her parents joined her. Her mother reached for her hand across the table. "Whatever happens, we are proud," she said. Elena nodded, grateful but still tense. Her father added, "Do your best, not for them, for yourself." He meant it to comfort her, but the words still pressed on her like gentle weight. Expectations could be soft and loving, and still feel heavy. When they arrived at the studio, the lights already glowed bright and fierce. Cameras rolled, cables snaked across the floor. Crew members moved quickly from one place to another. Elena felt like she was inside a world built of electricity and adrenaline. The stage looked larger than yesterday. The seats seemed to stretch forever. For a moment, she imagined every empty chair filled with people watching her, waiting for her to prove she deserved to be there. In the hallway, she ran into another young pianist named Jonah. He looked a little older, confident but kind. He smiled when he recognized her from rehearsal. "First time on TV?" he asked. Elena nodded. "Same for me," he admitted. "It's strange, right? I keep waiting to wake up." She let out a small laugh, relief blooming in her chest like a small light. Maybe she wasn't the only one terrified. Maybe even confident people had cracks in their armor. During the interview session, Elena sat in a chair facing a camera. A host greeted her warmly, asking about her journey with music, how she felt being chosen, and what this opportunity meant to her. Every word felt like walking across thin ice. She spoke slowly, choosing her sentences like fragile things. She tried not to think about the camera lens staring at her like an unblinking eye. At one point, she stumbled on a word, her tongue tripping over itself. A small tremor shaped her voice. She winced, but the host smiled gently and moved on, and somehow the moment passed without breaking her. Still, she wondered how many people would notice. Would they judge her, laugh at her, or think she was weak? She tried to shake the thought, but it clung to her like static. This is pressure, she thought, real pressure. It wasn't like school auditions where her teacher clapped no matter what, or town recitals where people cheered just for being brave enough to take the stage. This was different here. She had to prove something, prove herself to strangers, to professionals, to people who didn't know her heart or her story. Rehearsal came again, and this time, the stage felt even more unforgiving. Elena sat down at the piano, her fingers resting on the keys like they were waiting for permission to move. She played her chosen piece, trying to focus on rhythm, precision, the flow of the melody. But her mind kept drifting to Victor's comment from yesterday. Technique but no confidence. It echoed like a shadow behind every note. Each time she hesitated, she imagined him frowning, imagined disappointment she hadn't earned yet but already feared. After she finished, Victor didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her, his eyes unreadable. His silence felt like a judgment all on its own. Finally, he spoke. "You are playing the notes, but you are not playing the music." Elena's breath caught. "What do you mean?" she asked before she could stop herself. He stepped closer. "Music is not perfection," he said. "It is honesty. You are trying to protect yourself, not express yourself." His words clung to her, not cruel but piercing. She didn't know whether to thank him or to cry. He turned away, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the echo of the piano. Jonah approached her again later. "He's harsh with everyone," he said. "Don't take it personally?" She nodded, but the sting didn't fade. Maybe Victor wasn't wrong. Maybe she was hiding, even if she didn't mean to. Maybe fear had wrapped itself around her music like a veil. The realization hurt, but it also flickered with possibility. If she could learn to be braver, to open up, maybe her music could open too. That afternoon, she called her teacher back home. She sat on a bench outside the studio, headphones in, watching people rush by like currents in a river. "I don't know if I can do this," she confessed. Her teacher listened quietly before answering. "Elena, pressure is not the enemy," he said gently. "Fear is not the enemy, but letting fear control you is. You have faced moments that scared you before, and you grew. Why do you think this time is different?" She swallowed hard. "Because more people are watching," she whispered. "Then maybe," he replied, "more people need to see you try." His words felt like a hand reaching across the distance, steadying her. She closed her eyes and breathed, just breathed, until some of the tightness in her chest loosened. Later in the dressing room, she practiced without a piano, fingers moving in the air, tracing invisible keys. She closed her eyes and imagined her small living room back home, her scratched piano, the smell of her mother's cooking in the background, her father humming along without realizing it. That was where music was born for her, not here, not under lights or the watch of critics. The memory grounded her, softened her fear, reminded her that her music was not something she owed to the world. It was something she shared when she was ready. She thought of the other performers, how they carried their confidence like armor, and she wondered if confidence had to be loud. Maybe hers could be quiet. Maybe it didn't need to roar to be real. Maybe confidence could look like trying again. Even when her voice trembled, maybe confidence could sound like a single note played with heart, not perfection. Throughout the day, pressure pressed on her from every direction. Cameramen adjusting equipment, staff telling her where to stand, when to move, how to speak into the microphone. Every instruction felt like another tiny weight on her shoulders. But she refused to collapse. She moved carefully, step by step, building her courage one small action at a time. Each time she did something that scared her, she whispered inside, "See, you're still here." It became a mantra she carried like a secret. Shield. That evening, there was a meeting where Victor addressed the young performers. He stood on stage, back straight, hands behind his back. "Tomorrow is not just a show," he said. "It is a conversation with the audience. They will not remember your mistakes as much as they will remember how you made them feel." His voice echoed through the space. Elena listened, letting the words settle inside her. "Do not chase perfection," Victor continued. "Chase connection." She felt something shift, softly, like a door opening inside her. She didn't like Victor, not yet, but she understood him a little more. Maybe his sharpness came from wanting music to matter, not from wanting people to suffer. When the meeting ended, the performers walked out in a storm of emotions. Elena moved more slowly, like she was carrying something delicate. The night air outside the studio was cool, almost cold. She hugged her arms around herself and looked up at the sky, stars barely visible through the city glow. Pressure still sat with her, but it felt different now, not like a hand pushing her down, but like one guiding her forward, a strange companion she did not choose but might learn to accept. Back in her hotel room, she sat at the edge of the bed and closed her eyes. She imagined tomorrow, imagined stepping onto that stage, imagined her fingers finding the keys like old friends. She knew the fear would still be there, sitting beside her like a shadow, but maybe she could play anyway. Maybe the music would rise above the fear. Maybe her voice would finally speak through her hands. Her parents came in a little later. They didn't ask about her day. They didn't push her to talk. They just sat with her, sharing silence like a blanket. She leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, and her father reached for her hand. No words were needed. Pressure and love coexisted there, side by side, like two truths holding her up. As she got ready for bed, she looked in the mirror. She saw the fear in her eyes. Yes, but she also saw determination, small but present, like a spark that refused to die. She whispered to herself, "I am learning." It wasn't triumph, not yet, but it was honest, and maybe that was a beginning. When she finally lay down, she didn't chase sleep. She let it come, like music, like confidence, like belief. Slowly, gently, step by step, she fell asleep knowing tomorrow would demand everything from her. But she would show up, with her fear and her hope and her music, ready to try again. The morning of the live show began before the sun had fully risen. Light slipped into Elena's hotel room like it was nervous too, Soft and hesitant, Elena opened her eyes slowly, her heartbeat already awake. Before her mind, she lay there for a moment, listening to her breath, the distant hum of traffic outside, and the quiet world waiting for her to move. Today was the day millions of people would see her, hear her, judge her, or maybe even believe in her. The thought made her chest tighten and loosen all at once. Her parents joined her for breakfast. Her mother's hand trembled when she poured tea, and her father's voice softened as he spoke. They acted calm. But Elena could see the worry behind their eyes, not worry for her performance, but worry for her heart. They knew the world could be unkind, that dreams were fragile things. Elena smiled at them, a small, brave thing. "I'll try my best," she whispered. That was all she could promise, and maybe all she needed to. At the studio, the lobby felt different from the previous days. There was electricity in the air, something sharp and bright. Performers spoke in quick sentences, their voices slightly higher than usual, even the confident ones. Makeup artists rushed around, microphones were tested, clipboards flipped. Someone handed Elena a number badge for her turn. The paper felt heavier than it should, like it carried the weight of her future. The stage was unlike anything she had ever seen up close. Lights like stars, cables like roots, cameras like watchful eyes. A grand piano sat in the center, glossy and perfect, as if it had been waiting for her. Elena took a step toward it and felt her knees tremble. She wondered if the piano could sense fear, if it could tell that her hands were cold and her pulse was quick. She reached out and brushed a key lightly. The note was soft, a whisper, but it steadied her. Music was still here with her, it hadn't left. A production assistant approached her, headset over her hair. "You'll be going third in the lineup," she said, smiling politely. "When your name is called, walk confidently to the piano, take your position and wait for the cue." Elena nodded, but her mind rang with one thought: walk confidently. It sounded simple, but confidence didn't come to her like a coat she could put on. It felt more like a stitch she had to sew slowly, carefully, one breath at a time. Backstage, she watched the first performer take the stage. A violinist around her age, confident, graceful. He played with fire and precision. The audience applauded loudly. The second performer was a singer with a voice so soft it felt like honey melting into the room. Elena's fingers twitched, waiting, fearing, wanting. The stage was growing closer. She could feel it. Her name floated in her mind like a question. Was she ready? Could she do this? She didn't know. But the moment was already here. A staff member called out, "Elena Rivera, you're up." Her heart jumped. She wiped her palms on her dress and stepped forward. Each step felt like a mile, like walking across a bridge made of glass. When she reached the stage entrance, the lights shifted. The announcer's voice echoed, introducing her as a promising young pianist from a small town. The mention of her small town made her feel both tiny and rooted, like a seed with uncertain soil. She walked onto the stage, trying to remember how to breathe, trying to remember not to shrink. The applause sounded distant, like an ocean shell pressed to her ear. She reached the piano and sat. Her hands hovered above the keys. The cameras zoomed in, finding her face, her fingers, her nervous swallow. She could almost feel the lens like a second heartbeat beside her own. Just before she began, she looked up and saw Victor watching from the side of the stage, his posture sharp, his expression unreadable. The memory of his words from rehearsal flickered in her head, not as a wound but as a challenge. "Do not protect yourself," he had said. "Be honest." She lowered her gaze, let her eyes close, and let the world fall away. The studio, the lights, the cameras, all of it dissolved until nothing remained but her and the piano. Like home. The first notes left her fingers like a sigh, soft but certain. The melody moved forward, fragile but alive. She didn't play perfectly. Not every transition flowed the way she wanted. But for once she didn't panic when something wasn't perfect. Instead of gripping the keys like a lifeline, she touched them like a friend. Her shoulders loosened, the music warmed. She imagined her living room, her old piano, the chipped keys that had taught her everything. The scent of rosemary from her mother's garden drifting in through the window. That memory wrapped around her like a blanket. A small mistake slipped into the melody, barely noticeable, but she felt it. Instead of freezing, she breathed through it. The mistake fell away like a leaf on the wind. The music continued. It was human, not flawless, but honest, and maybe that was enough. Maybe even beautiful in its own way. She let the notes swell, soft and vulnerable, each one a piece of her heart she couldn't say out loud. Near the end of her piece, she opened her eyes. She expected to feel exposed, but instead she felt grounded. Her heart still raced, but something inside her had steadied, like her fear finally found a place to rest instead of clawing at her. She finished with a gentle chord, letting it linger in the air like a question. Then silence, a heavy, waiting silence. Elena lowered her hands and pressed them to her lap, unsure if she should look up. And then applause. It started small and grew. The room wasn't exploding with cheers, but it was real, it was warm. It was enough to make her eyes sting. She stood carefully, her legs like branches in the wind, and bowed. When she looked to Victor, she didn't see approval, but she didn't see disdain either. His expression had softened, just a fraction. Like a door cracked open, maybe wider than before. Backstage, she let out a breath that felt like it had been waiting for hours to escape. Jonah was waiting for her, smiling. "You played with heart?" he said. "Not many people do that." She blushed, unsure how to accept the compliment. "I was terrified," she admitted. Jonah shrugged. "Maybe that's part of it," he said. "Fear means it matters." His words bumped gently against her heart. She tucked them away like a note she would read later. But the comfort didn't last long. Just as she started to relax, she overheard two staff members whispering, their voices low but sharp enough to cut. "She's sweet," one said, "but nothing memorable," the other replied. It felt safe, like she was playing not to mess up. Elena's throat tightened. The applause she had earned cracked a little in her mind, crumbled like old paint. Safe. The word stung worse than a mistake would have. Safe meant forgettable. Safe meant replaceable. Safe meant invisible. She forced herself to walk away before their words could root too deeply. But they followed her anyway, echoing like footsteps. Her parents hugged her, proud and emotional, but Elena's smile was thin. She couldn't stop replaying the whispers. She couldn't stop wondering if she had failed in a way no one could see except the people who mattered most in this world. During the break, the performers gathered in the green room while the judges finished their assessments for the first half of the show. The room buzzed with energy. Some talked excitedly about their performances. Others paced back and forth, rehearsing in their minds. Elena sat in a corner, her fingers tapping on her knees like they were searching for keys that weren't there. She wanted to be proud. She wanted to cling to the applause, but the doubt was loud, drowning out everything else. Jonah sat next to her, noticing her silence. "Don't listen to every voice you hear," he said gently. "Especially the ones that don't know your story." She nodded, but words didn't help much today. Her heart felt bruised, not broken, but tender in a way that made movement difficult. She wondered if every performer carried this weight, or if she was just too soft for this world. When Victor entered the room, all conversation stopped. He looked at each performer in turn, his gaze not cruel, but assessing. He spoke without asking for attention, yet everyone leaned in. "Some of you are chasing perfection," he said. "You will not find it. Others are chasing approval." His eyes paused briefly on Elena. "You will never catch it." She felt heat rise to her face, unsure if the words were meant for her or for everyone. Victor continued, "The only chase worth running is the one toward truth." His voice didn't shake, didn't soften. Truth will not always win awards, not always impress judges, not always trend online. But truth stays, truth grows, truth matters. His words settled over the room like dust in sunlight. Elena looked at him, not with admiration, but with curiosity. Maybe he wasn't just harsh. Maybe he was trying to carve something real from the air. Something that didn't fit neatly into applause or failure. Maybe his disappointment wasn't about her skill, but about what she held back. She didn't know how to feel about that yet, but it planted a seed in her mind. As the show continued, Elena watched the next performers from backstage. Their confidence looked like armor, shiny and strong. But now she wondered what hid beneath it. Were they scared too? Did they worry about being seen? Really seen? She realized that music on this stage was more than sound. It was a conversation with the world, and she had barely begun to speak. When the first half ended, the host announced a surprise twist for the second round. Each performer would choose a new piece, something not on their original program. something that represented who they were now, not who they were when they arrived. The room erupted in whispers, some excited, some anxious. Elena felt her heartbeat stutter. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't prepared for anything beyond what she had rehearsed 1,000 times. Her mind raced. What could she play? What would show who she was? Who was she? Really? A girl who loved music but feared people. A pianist with heart but trembling hands. Was there a piece for someone like that? Nothing came to her. Nothing that felt right. Nothing that felt like truth. And then, softly, like a memory brushing against her shoulder, she remembered a piece she had taught herself months ago. Rhapsody Tempest No. 7, a composition known for its difficulty, a piece even Victor had once attempted and never finished in a public performance. She knew it wasn't perfect in her hands, but it felt like fire. It felt like a storm that lived in her ribs. It felt like something she could pour her entire heart into. Even if it swallowed her whole, her stomach dropped. The idea was terrifying. It felt reckless, it felt impossible, and yet, something inside her stirred, something stubborn and bright. Maybe this was her moment, not to be perfect, but to be brave, to stop playing safe, to stop protecting herself, to stop hiding behind careful notes and open herself to the uncertainty of a storm. She stood slowly, her knees shaky, and walked to the coordinator to submit her choice. When she handed over the card with the piece name, the coordinator blinked in surprise. "Are you sure?" they asked. Elena swallowed hard. "I'm sure," she said. The words felt too big for her voice, but they were true, and they stayed steady. Across the room, Victor watched her, not intervening, not advising, just observing. For the first time, Elena didn't look away. Their eyes met, and his expression didn't change, but something in the moment felt like silent agreement, like a challenge passed between them. Not a cruel one, but a necessary one. Later, alone for a moment backstage, Elena placed her hand over her heart, feeling it race. She was terrified, more terrified than she had ever been. But beneath the fear was something else, something like possibility, something like a door waiting for her to walk through. The whispers from the staff still echoed, the doubt still lingered, the fear still pressed, but so did the spark, the belief that maybe, just maybe, she could rise, not above others, but above who she had been yesterday. She knew the performance could go wrong. She knew she could stumble, that the world could see her break, but maybe breaking wasn't the end. Maybe breaking could be the beginning of becoming. The stage called to her like a question, and she was ready to answer, not with perfection, but with truth. Tomorrow, she would walk toward the storm, not to defeat it, but to stand in it and play. The night before the second round felt like the longest night of Elena's life. She sat on the hotel balcony wrapped in a blanket, her fingers tapping nervous rhythms on her knees. The city glowed below her, lights blinking like restless stars on the ground. It didn't feel like the night before a performance. It felt like the night before stepping into something unknown. A place where nothing was promised, not even safety. Her mother joined her outside, quietly handing her a warm mug of chamomile tea. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. Elena shook her head. "My mind won't stop," she whispered. Her mother didn't give advice, didn't tell her to calm down or think positive. She simply sat beside her, leaning their shoulders together, sharing silence like a warm coat. Sometimes support didn't need words, sometimes being there was enough. Later, Elena stood in front of the bathroom mirror, practicing breaths like her music teacher had taught her. In for 4, out for 6, slowly, gently, reminding her body she was in control, even if her thoughts weren't. She imagined the room where she had first learned to play Rhapsody Tempest No. 7. How she had sat for hours figuring out patterns with no one watching, how the music had felt like lightning she could hold with her fingertips. She reminded herself that she had chosen this piece because it meant something to her, not because she wanted to look impressive. Sleep eventually came in pieces, like pages of a book flipping slowly. When morning arrived, she felt like she hadn't slept at all. But she forced herself up. The world was already moving, and she had to move with it. At the studio, the atmosphere had changed again. Yesterday had been pressure. Today felt like history waiting to be written. Radio hosts buzzed around interviewing staff. Audience lines wrapped around the building. Fans held posters for performers. Elena wondered if anyone knew her name yet. She didn't expect them to. but the thought flickered anyway. Fragile but real. Inside, the stage crew made adjustments for the new round. A staff member handed Elena a small card with her placement in the second performance order. Fifth. 5 felt like a strange number. Not early enough to get it over with, not late enough to watch and learn from everyone else. She placed the card in her pocket and pressed her hand over it, feeling her heartbeat through the thin paper. Other performers practiced in corners, humming to themselves or running their hands along invisible instruments. Jonas sat at a small table with his sheet music, scribbling notes as if trying to memorize confidence. Elena approached him. "What did you pick?" she asked. He smiled nervously. "Something new," he said. "Something that scares me a little?" She nodded, feeling a sense of shared understanding. Scary felt like the theme of the day, like fear was the price of truth. Time moved strangely as the show began. It felt slow and fast at the same time, like a river carrying her whether she was ready or not. The audience was larger today, more cameras, more lights, more people waiting for something worth remembering. Elena tried not to think about the viewers watching from home, or the strangers who would talk about this online. She tried to think only of the piano, the keys, the music she had chosen to share. One by one, performers took the stage. Some soared, some struggled. Applause rose and fell like waves. Elena watched, heart pounding, trying to hold herself together. Each performance reminded her that she was about to step into the same light, the same scrutiny, the same risk. The thought made her breath catch, but she stayed still, not running, not hiding. When the host called her name, time seemed to stutter. She walked onto the stage, not confident but determined. It wasn't the confident walk the assistant had suggested, but it was honest. She could feel fear in her steps, but she kept going. She sat at the piano and placed her hands on the keys. The instrument felt colder today, maybe because she was colder inside, or maybe because this piano, this performance, this moment demanded something different from her. She looked up briefly and saw Victor watching, his expression unreadable, not cruel, not kind, just present. He wasn't waiting for her to fail. She realized. He wasn't waiting for her to shine either. He was waiting to see who she would choose to be. Elena took a breath, deeper than any she had taken before, and began. The opening measures of Rhapsody Tempest No. 7 were soft, like footsteps on wet ground. She played them carefully, her fingers trembling, but as the melody grew, something inside her steadied. The music shifted from gentle to fierce, patterns twisting like storm clouds forming. Her hands moved faster, chasing the rhythm, not perfectly, but passionately. Halfway through, the piece demanded everything: speed, precision, control. Elena felt the world tilt, her heart pounding in her throat. Sweat gathered at her hairline. Her fingertips burned with effort. She missed a note, and a gasp rippled through the audience. For a moment, fear clawed at her, whispering for her to stop, to run, to disappear. But she didn't stop. She didn't protect herself this time. She leaned into the music harder, letting the mistake be a part of the storm, not the end of it. The piece roared with emotion, her playing not clean, not polished, but alive. She reached the part of the piece Victor had never finished publicly. The transitions that twisted like impossible knots. The notes that felt like running uphill through wind. Elena faltered once, twice, but kept going. Tears gathered in her eyes, not from sadness but from effort, from the sheer weight of trying, from wanting so badly to speak through music in a way words never could. When she reached the end, her final chord didn't ring like perfection. It rang like survival, like truth, like a heart beating through fear. Silence followed, heavy and uncertain. Elena stared at her hands, waiting for the world to decide who she was now. Then applause began, slow at first, then swelling like a wave catching sunlight. It wasn't the loudest applause of the night, but it was real, it was honest. It was enough to fill her lungs with something like breath again. She stood and bowed, tears slipping down her cheeks. She didn't try to hide them. Today wasn't about hiding. Backstage, no one whispered this time. Jonah hugged her tightly. "You didn't play perfect," he said. "You played brave." His voice shook a little, like he had been holding his breath too. She laughed softly through her tears. "I think I needed to." A few minutes later, Victor approached her. Not with the dramatic stride of a television moment, but with a quiet step. He looked at her for a long second, and Elena met his gaze, not flinching this time. "You entered the storm," he said. And you did not drown. His words surprised her, gentle in their own sharp way, not praise, not criticism, but recognition. She didn't know what to say, so she nodded, and he nodded back, and that felt like a conversation all on its own. As the show continued around her, Elena sat in a chair backstage, letting everything settle. She knew she hadn't been perfect. She knew some people would criticize her performance, point out her missed notes and shaky transitions. She knew not everyone would understand what that performance meant to her. But she also knew something else, something she had never known so clearly until this moment. She had not been forgettable. She had not been safe. She had not been invisible. She had been seen, even if imperfectly. She had been heard. Even if her voice shook, she had been herself, even if she was still learning who that was. Later, when she returned to the hotel with her parents, her mother kissed her forehead. Her father hugged her tightly, and Elena didn't feel crushed by their pride this time. She felt lifted by it, supported by it, held by it in a way that felt strong rather than heavy. That night, she lay in bed and closed her eyes. The music still moved inside her like echoes, like waves that hadn't reached the shore yet. She realized that this performance wasn't the end of her story. It was the middle, the moment where the world shifted, not in her favor, but in her direction. Tomorrow would come, and the world might still doubt her. But she wasn't as afraid anymore. Not because she had proved anything, but because she had tried, truly tried. Maybe bravery wasn't winning. Maybe bravery was showing up when your hands shook. Maybe bravery was sharing your heart even when it trembled. Maybe bravery was the storm, and the music was how you learned to breathe inside it. And as sleep finally came to her, slow and gentle, she held on to one truth stronger than anything else. She would keep playing. Not for applause, not for approval, not even for Victor. She would keep playing because her music was hers, and she had finally found the courage to let the world hear it. The morning after the second round felt unreal. Elena woke up expecting nerves, expecting her heart to sprint the moment she opened her eyes. Instead, she found a strange calmness waiting for her. Not confidence exactly, but a quiet space where her fear didn't race ahead of her. She sat up slowly, stretching her fingers like they were remembering the piano even without keys beneath them. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table. She hesitated before checking it, unsure if she was ready to see what the world thought. When she finally looked, she found messages from classmates, her music teacher, and even people she barely knew. Some were simple congratulations, others emotional paragraphs about how her performance made them feel brave too. She read slowly, letting each message settle on her like sunlight, warming places still cold with doubt. She didn't open social media yet. She knew there would be criticism somewhere out there, ready to sting, ready to gnaw at her if she let it. She wanted to protect the small spark of pride inside her before the world tried to blow it out. Her parents were already awake, talking softly near the window. They looked up when she stepped into the room, their smiles soft and full. "We're proud of you," her father said, the words gentle like he knew she might flinch. She didn't flinch this time. She nodded. "I think I'm proud of me too," she whispered, and saying it felt like crossing a bridge she thought was broken. The studio car arrived to pick her up soon after. Today was a day of interviews, reflections, and announcements. She didn't know if she would advance to the final round, or if the journey would end here. The uncertainty didn't crush her the way it used to. Maybe because she had already faced the storm she feared most, and she was still standing. At the studio entrance, she paused before going in. Her hand rested on the door handle. She closed her eyes and took a breath, remembering the feeling of the keys beneath her fingertips, remembering the sound of applause washing over her like a tide, remembering the moment she chose courage instead of hiding. That memory steadied her more than any deep breath ever could. Inside, the world buzzed with movement. Reporters lined the hallway, staff members rushed around with clipboards, performers who had become familiar faces stood in clusters, their expressions a mix of nerves and pride. Jonah spotted her from across the room and waved her over. His smile was wide, shaky at the edges. "They're announcing results soon," he said. His voice carried excitement and dread in equal measure. Elena nodded, her hands growing warm. "Whatever happens," she said, "I'm glad we got here." Jonah's eyes softened. "Yeah," he replied. "Me too." They stood shoulder to shoulder as the host appeared on stage. The lights dimmed slightly. casting a spotlight over the podium. Cameras rolled. The audience hushed, and Elena could feel her heartbeat in her fingertips. The host spoke with practiced enthusiasm, celebrating the journey of the young performers, the bravery they had shown, the beauty of their talent. Elena barely heard the words, her mind hovering in a space between hope and surrender. Then, the list began, one name announced, applause, relief nearby like a wind brushing by. Another name, then another. Elena held her breath without meaning to. Her name didn't come. She felt her chest tighten, her stomach drop. Then, the fifth name, Elena Rivera. For a moment, she didn't react. The world felt like it froze around her. Jonah nudged her with a grin. "That's you?" he whispered. Her parents cried out softly in the audience. She stepped forward, her legs trembling, the applause hitting her like a wave she wasn't prepared for. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just breathed, one breath at a time, feeling the ground beneath her feet like an anchor. After the announcement, everything moved quickly, interviews, photos, schedules, decisions. Elena felt like she was floating through the day, pulled along by a current she didn't control, but didn't want to fight. Reporters asked her about her unexpected choice of peace, how she handled mistakes on stage, what she thought of Victor's reaction. She answered carefully, truthfully, but she held some things close. Some truths were hers to keep for now. Backstage, Victor approached her again, not in front of cameras, not for a dramatic moment, just quietly. "You advanced," he said. She nodded, unsure if he was offering congratulations or an observation. "Do you know why?" he asked. She hesitated. "Because I tried?" she asked, uncertain. "Because you didn't run from yourself," Victor said. She didn't know what to say, but she felt the meaning settle inside her like a seed, something that might grow into understanding with time. As she sat alone for a moment, letting the day catch up with her, a staff member approached, holding a tablet. "I thought you might want to see this," they said. The morning after the second round felt unreal. Elena woke up expecting nerves, expecting her heart to sprint the moment she opened her eyes. Instead, she found a strange calmness waiting for her. Not confidence exactly, but a quiet space where her fear didn't race ahead of her. She sat up slowly, stretching her fingers like they were remembering the piano even without keys beneath them. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table. She hesitated before checking it, unsure if she was ready to see what the world thought. When she finally looked, she found messages from classmates, her music teacher, and even people she barely knew. Some were simple congratulations, others emotional paragraphs about how her performance made them feel brave too. She read slowly, letting each message settle on her like sunlight, warming places still cold with doubt. She didn't open social media yet. She knew there would be criticism somewhere out there, ready to sting, ready to gnaw at her if she let it. She wanted to protect the small spark of pride inside her before the world tried to blow it out. Her parents were already awake, talking softly near the window. They looked up when she stepped into the room, their smiles soft and full. "We're proud of you," her father said, the words gentle like he knew she might flinch. She didn't flinch this time. She nodded. "I think I'm proud of me too," she whispered, and saying it felt like crossing a bridge she thought was broken. The studio car arrived to pick her up soon after. Today was a day of interviews, reflections, and announcements. She didn't know if she would advance to the final round, or if the journey would end here. The uncertainty didn't crush her the way it used to. Maybe because she had already faced the storm she feared most, and she was still standing at the studio entrance. She paused before going in. Her hand rested on the door handle. She closed her eyes and took a breath, remembering the feeling of the keys beneath her fingertips, remembering the sound of applause washing over her like a tide, remembering the moment she chose courage instead of hiding. That memory steadied her more than any deep breath ever could. Inside, the world buzzed with movement. Reporters lined the hallway, staff members rushed around with clipboards, performers who had become familiar faces stood in clusters, their expressions a mix of nerves and pride. Jonah spotted her from across the room and waved her over. His smile was wide, shaky at the edges. "They're announcing results soon," he said. His voice carried excitement and dread in equal measure. Elena nodded, her hands growing warm. "Whatever happens," she said, "I'm glad we got here." Jonah's eyes softened. "Yeah," he replied, "me too." They stood shoulder to shoulder as the host appeared on stage. The lights dimmed slightly, casting a spotlight over the podium. Cameras rolled, the audience hushed, and Elena could feel her heartbeat in her fingertips. The host spoke, with practiced enthusiasm, celebrating the journey of the young performers, the bravery they had shown, the beauty of their talent. Elena barely heard the words, her mind hovering in a space between hope and surrender. Then, the list began, one name announced, applause, relief nearby like a wind brushing by. Another name, then another. Elena held her breath without meaning to. Her name didn't come. She felt her chest tighten, her stomach drop. Then, the fifth name, Elena Rivera. For a moment, she didn't react. The world felt like it froze around her. Jonah nudged her with a grin. "That's you?" he whispered. Her parents cried out softly in the audience. She stepped forward, her legs trembling, the applause hitting her like a wave she wasn't prepared for. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just breathed, one breath at a time, feeling the ground beneath her feet like an anchor. After the announcement, everything moved quickly, interviews, photos, schedules, decisions. Elena felt like she was floating through the day, pulled along by a current she didn't control, but didn't want to fight. Reporters asked her about her unexpected choice of peace, how she handled mistakes on stage, what she thought of Victor's reaction. She answered carefully, truthfully, but she held some things close. Some truths were hers to keep for now, backstage. Victor approached her again, not in front of cameras, not for a dramatic moment, just quietly. "You advanced," he said. She nodded, unsure if he was offering congratulations or an observation. "Do you know why?" he asked. She hesitated. "Because I tried?" she asked, uncertain. "Because you didn't run from yourself?" Victor said. She didn't know what to say, but she felt the meaning settle inside her like a seed, something that might grow into understanding with time. As she sat alone for a moment, letting the day catch up with her, a staff member approached, holding a tablet. "I thought you might want to see this," they said. Elena braced herself, expecting a critic, expecting a harsh headline. Instead, the screen showed a clip of her performance online, and beneath it, comments from strangers all over the world. Some said she inspired them. Some said they saw themselves in her shaking hands. Some said her courage made them want to try again at something they had given up on. One comment read, "She made mistakes, but she made me feel something." Elena read that line over and over. Her breath shook, her eyes blurred. Not perfect, but honest, honest enough to move someone, honest enough to matter later. She found a quiet corner backstage, sitting on the floor with her knees pulled to her chest. She pressed her forehead against her arms and let tears fall, not from sadness, not from fear, but from relief, from release, from the overwhelming truth that she had been seen and not shattered. Jonah eventually found her, sliding down to sit beside her. "Cry it out," he said softly, not asking questions, not needing answers. They sat there together, two young artists in a hallway that smelled like dust and stage lights, letting themselves feel everything they had held back. When she finally lifted her head, she felt lighter, like exhaling after holding her breath for years. "I don't know what comes next," she said. Jonah grinned. "Nobody does," he replied. "That's part of it." In the days that followed, preparations for the final performance intensified. Elena didn't know what piece she would choose yet. She didn't want to chase something bigger or harder just to impress. She wanted to choose something true, not a storm this time. Maybe something that felt like what came after the storm, a sunrise, a breath, a beginning. She practiced for hours each day, not out of fear, but out of love. Sometimes she stumbled, sometimes she cried, sometimes she laughed at how far she had come. Her parents watched from the sidelines, not pushing her, just being there, reminding her that she was not alone. One afternoon, while she practiced on a studio piano, the door creaked open, and Victor stepped inside. Elena tensed, her fingers freezing above the keys. "Continue," he said, taking a seat in the back corner. She played, her hands trembling at first, then steadying. When she finished, he stood. "You have grown," he said, not smiling, but not distant either. "Growth is rarer than talent." Elena blinked. "Thank you," she said quietly. She didn't know what their relationship was now, mentor and student, critic and performer, storm and survivor. Maybe it didn't need to be defined yet. Maybe it could just be two people who both cared about music in different, complicated ways. That night, Elena sat with her notebook and wrote a list of what she wanted her final performance to feel like. Not what she wanted it to achieve. Not what she wanted others to say about it. She wrote, "I want to feel like I am home. I want my music to breathe. I want to remember why I started. I want to choose love, not fear." She didn't know which piece would do that yet, but she knew she would find it. She wasn't rushing anymore. She wasn't performing to escape something. She was performing to share something. As she turned off the light and crawled into bed, her fingers tingled with anticipation instead of dread. Her heart beat fast, but it didn't hurt. It felt awake, alive, ready. She stared at the ceiling and whispered, "I'm still learning." The words didn't feel like an apology anymore. They felt like a promise. Tomorrow, she would choose her piece, soon. She would stand on that stage one last time, not to prove she belonged, not to prove she was good enough, but to be herself, fully, honestly, bravely. And as she fell asleep, she realized something she had never understood until now. The world didn't need her to be perfect, it just needed her to play. The morning of the final selection day arrived like a soft knock at the door of Elena's heart. She opened her eyes, slowly, feeling the weight of everything ahead, but also the lightness of knowing she had survived so much already. She lay in bed for a moment, letting herself breathe, letting the quiet settle before the day claimed her. Today wasn't the final performance yet, but it was the day she would choose who she would be on that stage, and that felt just as big. She sat up, pushed her hair behind her ears, and whispered to herself, "One step at a time." The words felt like a gentle rope she could hold onto. She moved to the bathroom, brushed her teeth, splashed water on her face, watched the droplets slide down her cheeks like tiny comets. She stared at her reflection, searching for the girl who had once been afraid to speak, searching for the version of herself who now dared to try even when her voice shook. She found both, and oddly, that comforted her. Breakfast with her parents was quiet but warm. They didn't ask what piece she would choose. Maybe they knew she didn't have the answer yet. Or maybe they trusted she would find it without their guidance. Her father reached across the table and squeezed her hand gently. "Whatever you decide, let it be yours," he said. The words were soft, but they landed deep, like seeds on the ride to the studio. The city moved around her like a river of sound and motion. Elena watched people through the window, wondering if any of them understood how heavy a dream could feel, how hope could glow and weigh you down at the same time. She wondered if anyone passing by had ever chosen something that scared them, not because it was required, but because growth lived on the other side. When she walked into the studio, the energy felt different from all the previous days, less frantic, more focused, like the world was leaning in, listening. The staff greeted her with familiar smiles. Performers she knew nodded at her, not as competition, but as travelers on the same strange road. Jonah rushed over, breathless. "They're letting us rehearse all day," he said, his eyes bright with nerves and excitement. "No pressure, right?" Elena laughed gently. "Only a little," she replied. The practice rooms were open, each containing a piano and just enough space to think. Elena chose the corner room, the one with a window overlooking the courtyard. She sat on the bench and placed her hands on the keys, but didn't play yet. She just let the weight of the moment sit beside her, not as a burden, but as a reminder that what she chose next mattered, not to the world, but to her heart. She began to play pieces she knew well, songs that felt like home, melodies she could wrap around herself like blankets. They sounded nice, safe, practiced, but something felt missing. She shook her head and whispered, "Not this?" She tried something harder, sharp and fiery, but the notes tasted like imitation, like she was borrowing someone else's story. She stopped again, hands hovering over the keys like they were waiting for a truth she hadn't found yet. In the hallway, she heard music drifting from other rooms, Jonah practicing, something aching and slow, a violinist shredding through runs that sounded like lightning, someone humming a tune that sounded like a heartbeat. The world was full of stories, full of voices, and she needed to find her own. She remembered her list from last night, the things she wanted her music to feel like: home, breath, beginning. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine what music like that sounded like. Her fingers moved gently, almost without permission. Searching, she played a progression she hadn't practiced in months. Something she once wrote for herself on a quiet afternoon when she thought no one would ever hear it. A small melody bloomed, delicate and uncertain, like a flower opening in slow motion. Then more notes, warmer, deeper. Her heart recognized the piece before her mind did. It was something she had written. A composition she had tucked away because she never believed it was good enough. Something she thought was too simple, too raw. To her, it didn't show off her skill. It didn't climb impossible scales or demand speed. It asked for honesty, for presence, for breath. Elena stopped playing suddenly, fear prickling at the back of her neck. My own piece? She whispered to the empty room. It felt impossible, like stepping onto a stage without armor, like showing the world her heartbeat without a shield. But something inside her answered, a quiet voice she had learned to trust. This is the truth. Before she could talk herself out of it, she went to the coordinator's office, her palms sweaty, her throat tight. I want to perform an original composition, she said. The coordinator blinked, surprised. You'll need to register it. They said, we'll need sheet music, a title. Elena nodded, suddenly aware that her piece didn't even have a name. She swallowed, heart racing. I'll bring it, she said. The coordinator gave her a form to fill out, and Elena stepped out with shaking hands. She found a quiet corner with a table, pulled out her notebook, and started writing the sheet music as best she could, her pencil scratching across the paper like a heartbeat made visible. The title came to her like a whisper. After the storm. She wrote it at the top, and felt something shift inside her. Jonah found her again, glancing at the title. That's beautiful, he said. It's mine? She replied. The words sounding both terrifying and liberating. Jonah smiled softly. Then it's exactly the right choice, he said. He didn't ask to hear it. He didn't offer advice. He just nodded like he knew this was a moment she had to walk alone. Hours passed in a blur of rehearsal and revisions. Elena played the piece over and over, adjusting tiny parts, like tuning her own heartbeat. She added a soft lift to the ending, a little breath that felt like a door opening to sunlight. She left small imperfections on purpose, places where human hands interrupted the music, just enough to remind the listener that someone was living inside the notes. When she finally walked onto the main stage for rehearsal, she felt the familiar fear return, like an old friend who showed up uninvited. But this time she didn't push it away. She let it sit beside her, like a companion on the bench. She began to play, and the room seemed to still, even the dust suspended in the light. When she finished, she realized Victor had been listening from the back of the auditorium. He approached slowly, footsteps echoing in the quiet. Elena stood up, her knees shaky. It's mine, she said before he could speak. Victor nodded. I can hear that, he replied. His gaze softened, not in pity, but in understanding. This is the kind of music people remember, not because it is perfect, but because it is alive. His words hit her like a gentle wave, enough to move her, enough to let her breathe a little deeper. Do you think it's ready? She asked. Victor paused, looking at her. I think you are, he said, and somehow, that answer was enough. That evening, the studio held a small filming session where each finalist talked about their final performance choice. The host sat across from her, cameras around them like silent eyes. Why this piece? The host asked. Elena looked down at her hands, then up, meeting the camera like she was meeting the world. Because it's the first time I'm not trying to be anyone else, she said. It's the first time I feel like I'm playing for the person I used to be, the one who started all of this without knowing who she would become. Her voice shook, but she didn't break. It's the first time I'm choosing love instead of fear. The host smiled, her eyes shining. That's a performance I can't wait to hear, she said. Back at the hotel, her parents hugged her tightly. Their pride didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like wings. Her mother cupped her face. No matter what happens, this is already a victory, she said. Elena nodded. I know, she whispered, and she meant it. In bed that night, she didn't rehearse in her mind. She didn't worry about critics or mistakes or comparisons. She just closed her eyes and imagined the first note of her piece, the way it would float through the air like a breath of fresh wind. She imagined the last note, soft and open, like a door left ajar for tomorrow. She imagined standing up from the piano not as someone who won or lost, but as someone who chose truth. Sleep came gently, without a fight, and when morning arrived, she knew what mattered. She wasn't performing to prove she deserved the stage. She was performing to honor the version of herself who dared to step onto it. She would walk into the spotlight not to show the world what she had, but to show the world who she was, and that, she realized, was the bravest thing she had ever done. The day of the final performance arrived like a heartbeat made of sunlight and thunder. Elena woke before her alarm again. But this time, she didn't feel like she was rising to face a storm. She felt like she was rising to meet herself. She sat up slowly, pressing her palms against the mattress as if grounding herself in the moment. "This is it?" she whispered, and the room seemed to hold the words gently. Her parents waited for her by the door, her mother adjusting Elena's jacket even though it sat perfectly, her father double-checking the cab time for the third time. They didn't ask if she was nervous. They didn't ask if she was ready. They simply looked at her with quiet belief that didn't demand anything in return. That kind of belief felt like a soft hand on her back, guiding her forward without pushing. The car ride to the studio passed in a blur of streetlights and breathing. Elena pressed her forehead to the window, watching the world blur by, people on sidewalks, buses in motion, the sky trying to warm itself. It felt strange that the world was still turning like any other day, while her life felt like it was finding a new shape. When she stepped into the studio, the energy felt like a hum, a current, something alive and waiting. Staff members hurried by, fixing last-minute details. Sound checks echoed down hallways. The scent of stage makeup drifted through the air like a reminder of the world she was about to step into. Jonah waved her over from the corner, his tie crooked, his hands trembling. "I feel like I might faint," he said. Elena laughed nervously. "If you faint, I'll catch you," she replied. The joke felt light, and for a moment, so did the world. The finalists were gathered backstage for final instructions. The host, smiling brightly, explained the show order, the camera cues, where to exit if emotions overwhelmed them. Elena tucked each detail into her mind carefully, like placing delicate items into a box. The music director reminded everyone to stay present, to breathe, to trust themselves. His voice felt like a blanket, warm and steady. Elena was set. To perform second felt merciful somehow. Not the shock of first, not the agonizing weight of last. She would step into the light before her heartbeat had too much time to spin stories of failure or fear. Backstage, she closed her eyes and breathed, in for 4, out for 6, like her teacher taught her. She whispered the title of her piece in her mind, After the Storm. The title felt like a promise, a place she had earned, not through perfection, but through persistence, through choosing. Bravery over silence. The first performer walked on stage, applause blooming like a field of flowers. Their melody filled the studio, strong and elegant. Elena listened not to compare, but to feel the beauty of someone else's truth. She thought about how every performer here had lived their own story to reach this moment. Every trembling hand, every practice session, every doubt and every hope. They were all threads of the same tapestry. A stagehand touched her shoulder gently. "You're up next," he said. Elena nodded, her throat dry, her palms damp. She stepped toward the stage entrance, each step heavy and full, like her body understood the magnitude of this moment. The announcer spoke her name. "Please welcome, performing her original composition After the Storm, Elena Rivera." The applause sounded like ocean waves, distant but real. She walked out, and the lights found her immediately warm and bright, wrapping around her like a spotlight hug. She reached the piano, sat and placed. Her hands on the keys, they weren't cold this time. They felt like possibility. For a moment, the world held its breath with her. She closed her eyes, not to escape, but to arrive, and then she began to play. The first notes floated out like morning air, gentle, fragile, but full of hope. They didn't demand attention, they invited it. Her fingers moved carefully, not because she feared mistakes, but because she was savoring the story she was telling. Each note was a memory, a lesson, a wound, that had healed just enough to no longer hurt. As the piece grew, so did her presence. Her hands strengthened, her back straightened, her chest opened like a door. The melody warmed, blooming like sunlight on damp earth. It was simple in some places, intricate in others, but always true. It breathed like she did, honest, uneven, alive. She thought of the girl she used to be, the one who hid behind careful notes and silent dreams. She played for her. She played for the girl who stayed up late, trying to understand her own heartbeat, for the girl who never thought her voice would matter, for the girl who practiced in a living room with chipped keys and a squeaking pedal. She played for all the versions of herself she had abandoned along the way, until now, halfway through, a wave of emotion hit her, tears gathering at the edges of her eyes. She blinked, letting them fall, not breaking the rhythm, letting the emotion live inside the music instead of hiding from it. The audience couldn't see the memories behind the notes, but they could feel them. The room didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't interrupt. Her hands trembled on the final stretch, the melody stretching into a quiet ache, the kind that reminded you of rain after drought, of laughter after grief, of waking up after a long night of fear. The last notes lifted gently, like wings that weren't afraid of the sky anymore, and then the music settled, not with a thud, but with a landing, soft, open, unfinished in a way that promised more. Silence followed, not the heavy silence of judgment, but the kind of silence that exists right before a sunrise breaks the horizon. Then the applause came, not polite, not hollow, but rising like a wave that carried her with it. People stood, some wiping their eyes, some cheering, some just clapping with hands pressed over their hearts. Elena stood slowly, bowing with shaking knees and a trembling smile. Backstage, she stumbled into a chair, hands covering her face. The applause still ringing in her bones. Jonah rushed to her side, tears on his cheeks too. "You did it?" he whispered. She shook her head gently. "No," she said, voice trembling. "I shared it." When the rest of the show wrapped and all finalists had performed, they gathered for closing remarks. Elena stood with them, her heart beating in rhythm with the collective breath of people who had given everything they had. The host congratulated them all, announcing that the judges would take time to deliberate, that results would come soon. But Elena barely heard the rest, because she suddenly realized something important. She had stopped waiting to feel like she belonged. Maybe belonging didn't arrive as a moment of achievement. Maybe it arrived as a moment of acceptance. Maybe it wasn't granted to her. Maybe she had granted it to herself. A staff member approached her, eyes wide. "Elena, the clip of your performance is spreading online," they said, holding up a phone. A short video of her playing was already gaining thousands of views, comments pouring in. People weren't talking about her mistakes. They were talking about how she made them feel. "You made me cry." One comment read, "I heard myself in your music." Another said, "I didn't know someone could play like they were breathing." One more added. Elena stared at the screen, overwhelmed. Her hands flew to her face as sobs slipped out, not from sadness, but from the realization that her music had reached people she would never meet, hearts she would never know, and yet they understood her. Her parents wrapped her in an embrace, her father's voice breaking as he whispered, "You proved to no one but yourself." Her mother kissed the top of her head, and that was enough. Later that night, in the quiet of the hotel room, Elena sat by the window again, looking out at the world that suddenly felt bigger and smaller at the same time. Bigger because she knew now that her voice could travel beyond her own walls. Smaller because the fear that once filled every corner of her heart had shrunk into something she could hold without shaking. She didn't know yet if she had won the competition. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she did know this. Her music had lived, her truth had reached, her bravery had echoed, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she had to chase anything. For the first time, she felt like she could rest in who she was becoming. She placed her hand over her heart and whispered, "This is enough." The world outside glowed, quiet and electric, like a city holding its breath, waiting for morning, and Elena closed her eyes, ready to meet it. Morning arrived like a soft whisper against the windows. Elena woke slowly, not to an alarm or a rush of panic, but to the quiet hum of a new day. The hotel room light crept across the carpet gently, like the world was easing her into whatever came next. She blinked up at the ceiling, feeling the strange mix of calm and anticipation settling inside her chest. Today she would learn the results. But something felt different now. The results felt important, Yes, but not like a verdict on her worth. More like a chapter title instead of the whole story. Her parents moved around the room quietly, trying not to disturb her, but she could tell they were nervous. Her father's shoulders were tense as he folded a jacket. Her mother kept smoothing the same napkin on the table without noticing. It made Elena's heart ache. With tenderness, people think love always feels warm, but sometimes it feels like pressure too. Pressure from how much someone wants to protect you, how much they want life to be kind to you. She got dressed slowly, choosing simple clothes that felt comfortable. She tied her hair back, looked at her reflection, and didn't try to force a smile. She let her face be honest, nervous, thoughtful, quietly brave. She cupped her cheeks in her palms and murmured, "No matter what happens, I'll keep going." The reflection didn't answer, but she felt a tiny spark flicker in her eyes, something like agreement. The ride to the studio felt surreal, like she'd been here 100 times and also like it was the first time all over again. Cameras gathered outside now, reporters holding microphones, lights flashing every few seconds. Someone shouted her name, and she startled a little, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to strangers knowing her. It felt like walking into a room full of mirrors, her image reflecting back in ways she didn't recognize yet. Inside, the finalists gathered in the green room. The energy buzzed with nerves and hope. Jonah paced in a tight circle, muttering to himself, "Whatever happens, it's fine, it's fine." Elena gently reached out and touched his sleeve. "Breathe," she said quietly. Jonah stopped, inhaled shakily, and nodded. "Right?" he replied. "Breathing is good." They both laughed softly, the sound small but real. Victor entered the room a few moments later, and silence rippled through the air. He didn't command the quiet, it just happened, like the room acknowledged his presence automatically. Elena watched him with a new understanding. She didn't see the terrifying figure from the first day anymore. She saw someone who cared deeply about music, sometimes too sharply, sometimes imperfectly, but honestly. He glanced around the room, his gaze pausing briefly on her, not in judgment, but in recognition. She nodded once, and he returned it. The host appeared, calling everyone to the stage for the final announcements. Elena's knees trembled as she followed the group. Jonah walked beside her, whispering, "If I pass out, just step over me." She snorted softly. "No promises?" she replied. The humor loosened something inside her, like laughter untying a knot. They stood in a line on stage, the lights pouring down like a shower of stars. The audience held their breath. The judges sat poised, and the cameras captured every heartbeat. Elena's palms were damp. She wiped them subtly on her dress. Jonah bounced on his heels like he was trying to shake the nerves out of his bones. The host began speaking, thanking the performers, praising their growth, the courage they displayed. Elena heard the words but felt like she was floating above her body, like she was watching a version of herself from a distance, waiting to see who she would be after this moment. "And now," the host said, voice rising, "the results." A card was opened. Silence stretched like a held note. Elena felt her pulse in her ears, her throat, her fingertips, everywhere at once. The third-place name was announced. Applause erupted. Elena clapped for them, genuinely happy. It took effort to stay grounded, to breathe past the rising tide of nerves. Then second place, Jonah's name was called. He froze for a second, eyes wide, then looked at Elena, shock and pride battling across his face. She hugged him tightly. "You did it," she whispered. He whispered back, "So did you, no matter what." His words wrapped around her like armor. Then the host smiled, the pause stretching. "And first place, the winner of this year's showcase is..." A beat of silence, Elena Rivera. It didn't register at first. The name didn't feel like it belonged to her. It hung in the air like a bird unsure if it would land. People clapped, stood, cheered. Jonah laughed. Victor closed his eyes briefly, like the moment hit him somewhere deep. Elena just stood there, blinking, hands shaking. Then reality sank in, like a tide rushing up the shore and covering her feet. She had won. She had won. Her parents rushed to the stage, her father's eyes wet, her mother's voice cracking as she said her name over and over like it was a prayer. Elena sank into their arms, overwhelmed, trembling, her breath catching in her throat. Her heart felt too big for her ribs, too loud for her ears. Victor approached next, waiting until the applause softened. He didn't congratulate her loudly, he just placed a hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle. "You didn't win because you played perfectly," he said. "You won because you played truth." Elena swallowed hard, feeling tears rise again. "Thank you," she whispered. Victor nodded, stepped back, and let her have the moment without making himself the center of it. After the ceremony, the world became a whirlwind, reporters asking questions, staff handing her documents, opportunities appearing like stars blinking on in the night sky, invitations to perform at music halls, scholarship offers, interviews requested by magazines. Elena felt dizzy, like she was trying to drink from a waterfall. At one point, she slipped away to a quiet hallway, sinking onto a bench. She needed a moment to catch up with her own life. Jonah joined her after a few minutes, sitting beside her silently. They didn't talk at first, they just breathed, letting the noise settle outside like rain hitting a window. Finally, Jonah exhaled sharply. "What now?" he asked. Elena looked down at her hands, the same hands that had stumbled, soared, doubted, and dared. "Now?" she said softly. I just keep playing." Jonah smiled. "Yeah," he replied, "keep playing." When she returned home days later, her small town greeted her like a sunrise. Banners hung from shop windows, handwritten signs taped to doors. "Welcome home, Elena. We're proud of you. Our star." Children waved small paper stars on sticks, trying to get her attention. Elena blushed, overwhelmed by the love she never realized was waiting for her. At school, her old music room looked the same. Scratched piano, squeaky pedal, sunlight spilling across the floor like spilled gold. She sat at the piano, placing her fingers gently on the keys. They felt like an old friend greeting her. Someone peeked through the window, then another, then more, students gathering quietly to hear her play. She didn't send them away, she didn't hide, she played after the storm. Not as a performance, not as a winner, but as a girl who had learned how to stay when her fear begged her to run. The music filled the room, soft and warm, like home, like healing, like the beginning of something she didn't need to define yet. In the weeks that followed, life did not suddenly become perfect. There were days with doubt, days where the music didn't come easily, days where she compared herself to others without meaning to. But something had changed. She didn't crumble under those moments anymore. She didn't see them as proof she didn't belong. She saw them as part of the road, part of the story. She began writing more music, not to impress, but to explore, melodies inspired by moments most people overlooked. The sound of morning rain, the hush of a school hallway after dismissal, the echo of applause in an empty auditorium. She found beauty in ordinary things, and her music reflected that. Honest, human, imperfectly whole. One afternoon, she received a letter, not an email, a letter. The envelope bore Victor's signature handwriting. She opened it carefully, heart racing. Inside was a short message. "Elena, continue choosing truth. I will see you on a bigger stage someday, V.D." She read it 3 times, letting the words settle, not as pressure, but as possibility. Years later, people would ask her when everything changed, when she knew she was meant to play, when she realized her voice mattered. They expected her to say the moment she won, or the moment she played her original composition, or the moment the world began to notice her. But Elena always answered differently. "It changed the day I stopped playing to avoid mistakes," she would say, and started playing to be honest. Her journey didn't end with the trophy. It didn't end with applause. It didn't end with Victor's approval. It continued in every room she would ever play in, every trembling breath before she began, every note she chose because it felt true, every heart her music reached. The world didn't need her to be perfect, it needed her to be real, and she was, as she sat at the piano years later, preparing for her first international concert. She touched the keys like greeting an old friend. She whispered a thank you, not to the audience, not to Victor, not to the show, but to the girl she used to be, the girl who dared to try. Even when her hands shook, the curtain rose, the lights found her, and the world hushed. Elena smiled, breathed, and played, and her music lived.